you. Wow. That's a first. I'm going to come back here more often. What'd you give them, though? Thank you so much for having me here. I'm so glad to be a part of Gathering House. I don't know if you remember this, but we guys were back at Covenant. We were going there, and we are kind of thinking, what's the next step for us? I remember being in a meeting one time, a pastor's meeting, and one of these pastors said, hey, there's this building over on Garland. I would love to get it, but we couldn't do it. And started talking to Rob. Hey, Rob, you got to check out this building, and then just see where this has come. It's just pretty incredible. Not just the building, but the people. I've visited a lot of different churches, and I keep telling Rob, like, you got something special here. And not just a heart for the word, but also a heart for people. And it's hard to find both. Sometimes you see a lot of churches that are, very much Bible-centered, but very much Bible and focused on their own church. And you get some churches that are very much about serving people and all these things in here, but they don't really, not a Bible focus on it. And I feel like what Gathering House is, it kind of brings them both together where I feel like we're supposed to be. And so I'm just very encouraged about Gathering House and what you guys are doing. Praise God for all that you're doing here. And I'm just thankful to be a part of it. Thankful for your support and Family Promise. Many of you guys have volunteered over this last couple of years that you've been involved. If you have volunteered, done a meal or shared something up here at North Hill, could you raise your hand just so I can see just the people that have involved? Look at this. Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much for all you've done. As you know, Family Promise, we've been around for 20 years. You may or may not know, actually. And we've been serving 3 to 4 families at a time. And we do that through church partnerships. So North Hill, for example, is a host church. There's 14 of those. And then a bunch of support churches like you guys come to these churches and, hey, provide meals overnight. So our families will actually go to a church. They will eat dinner with volunteers who make a meal. They'll stay overnight in the Sunday school rooms. They have breakfast at the church, and then they go to our day center, which is located in the South Perry District. And so every year, about 10 to 15 families, we really kind of look at it as a mile deep, inch wide. Community empowerment is getting families out of homelessness back into homes. And over the last 10 years, 80% of these families have gotten back into homes, are still in homes. So it's the odds are unreal because of what we do. But this last few years, we keep getting calls. 10 to 15 a week saying, I'm a homeless family, I don't know what to do, I don't know where to go, can you help me? And we're like, I'm really sorry, no, we can't, because we're full, right? There's 3,500 homeless kids. And so this last year, God has just, it's just been an incredible year. Just to give you some perspective of what's happened this last year we got 9 families into homes. This last year, with all the different programs we've added on, we were able to get 65 families homeless into homes. That's been amazing. Super exciting. Last year, we were able to help a total of 16 families, homeless families. This year, we actually helped 279 families at some point along the line in their process of getting them back into homes or even providing services for them. And what blew me away, really almost brought me to tears when I finally did the census last week. We were able to help 70 people that were homeless last year, 75 people that were homeless the previous year. This year, this is legit, 1,275 people. So I don't know how, it's just crazy what God has done. And the thing about all of this is that everything we've done is impossible without volunteers. And just volunteers that make meals, that come down to serve, that care, that basically say, kind of step out of their comfort zone into a world of a hurting family. And I was really moved this morning, Rob, by your prayer during our early prayer time. Is that there's moms and dads and kids, especially kids, of no fault of their own, are homeless today, sleeping in cars, sleeping in houses, shared houses, sleeping in tents. And Family Promise is a community-powered response to homeless families. And so today, I really wanted to share a message with you. I really created this message, just kind of a foundation for why the Christians are called to care for the poor. So for many of you, this is what you do. This is your DNA. But I hope that they can reinforce and kind of continue to give you a biblical mindset. My goal isn't to make you feel guilty or to compel you or to twist your arm, but to really invite you into what God is doing in Spokane through homeless families. God has called us to care for the poor, and I believe that the message will show us. And I think, when I think about this idea, the title of the message is called How to Be Blessed. And, I think we think of the word blessed. And, if I were to ask you, how many like being blessed? Raise your hand. Yeah, right? How many would like more blessings? Raise your hand. Yeah, see, exactly. So we're all in the same boat. Like, you came to the right sermon. How to be blessed. I mean, there's not anybody here that doesn't want more blessings. But when I think of the word blessed and the word blessing, have you ever seen that Princess Bride movie? I'm going to show you a little slide here. Blessing. You keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means. The Bible, Jesus wants you to be blessed. And yet sometimes I don't think we know really what this means. And so I honestly chose this passage because I really feel like it provides a good framework for family promise. I had no idea what God was going to do to show me conviction and still provide conviction and bring me through this process. So let's look at Luke 14 and just kind of hear what Jesus has to say. He's at a dinner table. He's speaking to the host, and this is what he says. Luke 14, 12 through 14. He said also to the man who had invited him, "When you give a dinner or a banquet, do not invite your friends or your brothers or your relatives or rich neighbors, lest they also invite you in return and you be repaid. But when you give a feast, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed, because they cannot repay you. For you will be repaid at the resurrection of the just." So what I want to talk about today, really, and for those who like points to kind of know where we're going, I got 3 points for you. Talk about blessings that are cultural, a blessing that is biblical, and then how to be blessed forever. Those are kind of where we're going within this context of the passage. Each point is one verse, and kind of break it down step by step. This first verse, again, is Jesus says to the man who invited him when you give a dinner or a banquet, "Do not invite your friends or your brothers or your relatives or rich neighbors, lest they also invite you in return and you be repaid." Now, the context of this situation is there's 4 stories here in this whole context, and it's at one dinner. And where Jesus begins to reveal the heart and the sin of this culture as how they were eating together. Now, if you ever read through Luke's gospel and you were to actually take all the passages that Jesus was either going to or leaving from or talking in or talking about or food related, it's about 80% of the whole entire gospel of Luke that Jesus is involved in that. Think about it, that's a lot of food, a lot of conversation about food. No wonder he was called the glutton, right? I mean, it's like there's a lot going on. And I think what's important about meals is that it shows that Jesus is engaged in a friend of sinners. He's entering through and process and entering into relationships. And in this myth about this dinner, though, what Jesus was referring to is that the dinner wasn't about grace. It wasn't about inviting people over. It wasn't about a good time. It wasn't about even providing. This meal, and the reason Jesus is kind of speaking in such terms, is that this meal was about getting. This meal was about moving up the ladder, positioning and getting repaid later. There's a quote here that I read in a book that was really good. A guy named Tim Chester. He says this: "Central to the political stability of the empire was the ethics of reciprocity, a gift and obligation system that tied every person from the emperor in Rome to the child to the most distant province into an intricate web of social relations. Expectations of reciprocity were naturally extended to the table. Giving food to the poor was okay, but you gave them food at your back door. You never invited them in. That meant contamination." So meals in this time were used really not to bless others, but to bless yourself. Feeling the poor, that didn't elevate your business or your networks or your social position. So they wanted to be repaid or rewarded later to benefit your life here on earth. So Jesus steps into this issue and he speaks to the culture. He says, don't just invite people that are going to help bless you, your rich relatives, your neighbors, your friends, people that make you feel good. He goes on to talk about that whole process of not just them, but who else. See, this kind of came true to me a few years ago, actually 5 years ago. For about 5 years, I lived in Zambia. We were missionaries. And I don't know if you've ever moved to a different culture, where you step into a different culture and you see things with a real objective sense. That was kind of our experience, right? You step into Zambia and everything is new. And underneath all this newness is a way of order of how people do things. How you shake hands, how you greet, right? Between men and women and children. And one thing I began to notice was in the Zambian culture, there was a very power-ranking society. Everybody was trying to get to the top, and when you got to the top, you try to keep everybody down. And not only that, just extend to businesses and political systems, but also extended even to the ministry. As I worked with pastors, we trained pastors, I began to see the pastors didn't really just serve people as shepherds. They used the people to build their kingdom. Yeah, seriously, right? And so as I began to recognize this, and I was teaching pastors, right, I began to try to share with them what God's called us pastors to be. We're not about our kingdom, it's about building up others. This really came true one day. I remember I was about to go to speak at a pastor's conference, and I was getting ready to go speak that morning. My wife started homeschooling our kids, and so there was a whole bunch of dishes to do, and I started doing them. Now, in Zambia, you don't have dishwashers, so what happens is you have to actually wash your dishes. What happens, like the sink, and dishes go in, and you wash them, and then when you rinse them, you put them in the other thing. You guys tracking with me? Some of you might know, I don't know. And so I'm in the middle of doing this, right? I'm looking out the window, and I'm thinking about my sermon, and all of a sudden, now this didn't happen very often, probably remember a handful of times where I just felt like God spoke to me. Very clear, one word. It was so clear that I remember saying, no, that's not what you just said. He said the word, serve. It was so clear, I must have been speaking about my sermon, because I remember thinking, I actually prepared my sermon, God. I kind of argued with him. I got everything sorted. That's a great idea. I'll put that in the filing for later, and we'll take care of that later. I went off my life, forgot about whatever I heard, and got to the service, right? Well, there's probably 250 pastors, full room. And literally right before I started, the pastor walked up and said, okay, so you have 2 messages, right? I was like, no, I only have 1 message. No, you have 2 messages. And I was like, serve. Okay, I'll go with that one. First message, very underwhelming. I don't even remember what I said. I think people are still sleeping through it and whatever it was. All that prepared, but second one, I literally had about 10 minutes between the service, and I sat down in the back, and I opened my Bible, looking for a passage on serve, right? Opened to Philippians, and I got up and I preached the most memorable, amazing sermon I've ever preached without any preparation. God just spoke through. We got pastors up. It was an incredible experience. And what I did is I spoke to this idea of serving. Right? I actually brought an older pastor, younger pastor. We talked through this idea of serving. And I began to reveal the culture of how it's been and how it needs to be about mentoring and passing on the baton and leadership development. I exposed the culture, right? And I revealed the Bible. And it was like lights went on. It's one thing that I think was one of the most amazing experiences, because they began to see how their culture had kind of dictated how they behave, and now as the Bible is revealed to them, how do I change the way I live my life? And so as I began to look at this new culture, I looked across the water back in America, and I said, wow, there's a culture over here too. And a very similar thing, and I began to see some of the things that I'd always been doing just because culture was the way I grew up in it. It's like a fish in water, right? You don't really know you're just in this water. You get outside and you realize there's a different world. And so you begin to expose the Bible to the culture. There's a different way we're supposed to be living here. And I thought about this idea that we kind of ingrained in this from middle school to high school. It's like popularity, right? You want to be part of the popular crowd. And somewhere on the spectrum, you're on this popular crowd. We know what that's like. Many of us, right? We were in the bottom. Some of us were the top. Then we kind of back and forth. I began to see how in America we really lift up American Idol, right? The people on the magazines. You don't see homeless people on magazines in the grocery store. You see those that are beautiful and talented. You got to think about how the CEO of businesses, and we're always trying to get to the top of every situation. And we begin to use people in the same way. How do we use people to get myself going forward? And God began to reveal that to my heart. And begin to see what it was. Even as in a Family Promise nonprofit, I'd go to conferences or I'd go to galas and begin to see, okay, who can I talk to that I think would be rich to be able to donate for Family Promise, right? Who can help me build my thing? I remember a few times where I began to do that, and week after week I'd go to these things and end up just kind of talking to the wrong person and just being angst, and finally saying, God, forgive me for using people. And let me be a blessing. A couple months ago, I was at a conference down in Spokane Valley, and a whole bunch of people were there that I knew were going to be wealthy and smart and rich. But I remember saying, God, just let me be a blessing. And I walked out, and everybody was talking to somebody. There's one older man standing right there, and he was there, and I was there, and we started talking. I'm Steve. Nice to meet you. I'm Tom. Nice to meet you. Oh, where do you work? Oh, it's STCU. Oh, really? What do you do there? Oh, I'm the CEO. I was like, wow, you're kind of the kind of person I want to talk to. And yet, as I began to talk to him, here he's the CEO, and there's a whole bunch of people that can help build up his company, his STCU company. And yet, I kid you not, for 15 to 20 minutes, he just sat there talking to me. And he listened to my story, he listened about Family Promise, he was engaged, he was asking questions. And I just remember feeling like, here's a guy who, contrary to what we normally do in cultural situations, lowered himself, invited me into a conversation, and began to listen to what I had to say. And I think about that because, we start thinking about this culture of who and how we connect with people in our businesses, in our schools, in our families. And there's this cultural thing where it's all about how do we make ourselves feel better, how do we move up, how do we and it's cultural. Jesus comes into the situation at this dinner time, and he says, when you give a meal, don't just invite the rich person. Don't just invite the person that makes you feel better. Don't just invite somebody who could benefit you. Why? Because that's not biblical. It's cultural. And so begin to ask that question. Well, when was the last time you invited someone else other than your family or your neighbors or your friends over? Or helped someone below you at work who couldn't reward you? Or connected with someone the world could not benefit you? Why don't we do that? Well, it's hard. It doesn't feel good. It's uncomfortable. And yet, the idea when he says, well, you'll just get repaid here, what's wrong with that? Well, we won't be here forever. And Jesus reveals this cultural, temporary blessing. Don't just do this, but instead do this. Well, what's the second thing he's saying here? Well, it's this cultural blessing that is spiritual. Okay? When you give a feast, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed because they cannot repay you. When you give a meal, he says, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you'll be blessed. All of you said you wanted to be blessed today. You wanted more blessings. I'm here to tell you how. And here Jesus says, the blessing comes when someone can't repay you. When you do something for someone on earth that can't repay you, you will be blessed. Now, I don't know if you noticed or not, I was born hearing impaired. I have 2 hearing aids. 2 brand new, amazing hearing aids. I am so excited to tell you that my new hearing aids are actually Bluetooth. I could be sitting up here listening to music, and you would never know. I just got them, and it's changed my life. I can't even tell you. Like, I can listen to Audible, I'm driving, how many calls, I can talk right through my hearing. Anyway, I feel like a guy on 24, like Jack Bauer. I can talk to people. But if I were born 100 years ago, my life would be a whole lot different. Can you imagine? I can't imagine what it would be like and what I would do. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. I wouldn't probably have ever learned how to speak, right? Because hearing aids helped me to learn, and I had a great hearing impaired. I wouldn't have learned I wouldn't be able to listen. I don't know what I would be doing. My life would be a whole lot different. A few years ago when I was in Zambia, my hearing aids both broke at the same time. And I had like a backup pair that barely worked. And I remember just that season of being like 2 to 3 months where I could not hear anything. And I don't know what it was, but it was so weird because that 2 to 3 years, that 2 to 3 months, my kid never fought, they never yelled, they never screamed. It was really weird. I still haven't correlated why that happened during that season. But anyway. And I just think about that, right? I think about this idea that this population in this time was at the mercy of their economy, right? You didn't have hearing aids, they didn't have glasses, right? They didn't have crutches, they didn't have surgery, they didn't have all these things. And so really, the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind were at the mercy of their economy. Without someone helping them, they would not be able to survive. They would not be able to help, and they weren't going to be part of contributing to other people. And so in this situation, just like here where, for example, obviously we have government assistance, we have resources, there's still a sense of people that are the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind. Now, before we go there, the Bible isn't saying you can't invite your friends over or your rich relatives. He's saying don't exclusively invite your friends over. It says do not merely do one thing, rather also the other. Jesus is condemning the attitude which does good mainly for the sake of receiving earthly reward. So the thing here is that why would I want to invite someone to my house or my church that can't repay me? Well, Luke repeats this idea of this poor, crippled, lame, and blind. And it's really a lot like those that are marginalized, powerless, and vulnerable as a whole. So if you think about even in our society here, right? Literally poor, crippled, lame, blind, and figuratively as well. And so what he's saying here, I think the process here is his attitude is to be shaped by our experience of God's grace to us. Think about what Christ did when he came down on earth. Right? The rich became poor so that us who were poor could become rich. He died on the cross. He took all our pain and all our sin and exchanged for us his righteousness. And think about his attitude toward us in inviting us into his kingdom. I really believe what he's trying to do here is to get us a litmus test of do we understand the grace that God has given us? And this idea of inviting the poor, crippled, lame, and blind into his life, into others' our lives, is a litmus test of do we understand what he did for us? Because the truth about this is this. Our inviting the poor and the crippled, the lame, and the blind is a true reflection of understanding what Christ did for us. Because one, we are spiritually poor. We have nothing to offer for salvation. We are spiritually crippled. We are made powerless by sin. We are spiritually blind. We are unable to see the truth about Jesus without Jesus opening our eyes. And we are spiritually lame. We are unable to come to God on our own. Christ became poor so we could become rich. And we could see, we could hear, we could walk, and we could understand and respond to him. See, if you're that person this morning, if you're here, and God has invited you into his kingdom, I got some bad news for you. It's not because you're beautiful or talented or gifted or spiritual. In fact, if you are a true Christian, right, who follows God with all his life, that means you're a loser. I got some proof of this, right? 1 Corinthians 1, 26 to 29. Check this out. For consider your calling, my brothers. Not many of you were wise, according to worldly standards. Not many of you were powerful. Not many were of noble birth. That's me so far. But God chose what is foolish in the world to shame the wise. God chose what is weak in the world to shame the strong. God chose what is low and despised in the world, and even the things that are not, to bring to nothing things that are. God chose fools, weak, low, and despised. Why? So verse 29, so that no human beings might boast in the presence of God. Why did he choose all these poor, weak? Because when he did, and he transformed their life, who gets the glory? God does. It's like, how did he do that with that person? I don't know. God must be big. God chose. If you're chosen and you're invited and you're in the kingdom, this is us right here. You weren't chosen because you're the best. You were chosen so that God can get glory for your life. Bunch of years ago, I used to work for an organization called Sealand Service Shipping Company. It's a big company that ships containers all over the world. And I was assistant manager on the dock, and so I had ILWU and Teamsters. And I began to work with these guys. And one guy in particular was a truck driver. And we began talking about sports and baseball. And he coaches baseball every spring. And every year when they coach these leagues, they have these tryouts, and then the players get picked, and the best players get picked first, and so on and so on. You know the deal, right? You've been in a play yard. You never getting picked or last. You have that experience. Well, every year he goes into this experience and says, okay, guys, pick whoever you want. I'll take the last 15. And he does this year after year after year. And every year, their team wins a championship. And because I was like incredulous. I was like, what? What do you mean? He's like, well, we just take them on and we train them. Guys that can hardly run without falling are now hitting home runs. Like, how do you do that? Well, we just work with these guys and we train them. Now, who gets the glory in that championship when they get the championship ribbon or trophy? Is it the players? No, it's the coach, right? Because the coach took the losers and transformed them. And the coach gets glory. And I think in some ways, it's exactly what we're talking about here, is that God has called us. We were these people that he took in and he transformed, right? He showed what grace truly is. And then he said, I want to invite you to do the same thing to those that the world considers losers, marginalized, crippled, lame, and blind. He wants you to extend that grace because it's the true sign that you have received and understood your grace. Amen? Amen. Now, food is one common way to invite people in. What else? The Bible talks about washing people's feet. Think about people at work, the people at Lord that can't really benefit you. How much time do we invest in those? Think about people at the losers, or the people that are set aside, the homeless, right? And you think about people in your world, neighbors that maybe couldn't benefit. Anybody who can't repay you for something you do for them, I think is what we're talking about here. Let's take a moment to kind of process, what does that look like in my life? Who are some people that God has put in my life? I think about, like, for example, my neighbor. Like 80-year-old single widow and her 50-year-old son, and they live right next door. And it's one thing to shovel, it's one thing to sit and listen, and you just, every time you go, it's like there's nothing that they can give back, and yet it's so hard and so draining and so uncomfortable, right? I think we know that challenge of wanting to do good, but when you actually get into the good, it's hard. And yet when you invite people in to your world, when you invite them into a meal, I mean, that's like a big deal. You invite them into conversation. You begin to mentor people. It can be life-changing. I'll never forget the experience I had when I was in college. Believe it or not, I mean, you probably believe it because you look at me. You wouldn't think I was a football player at University of Washington, but I actually was. I was a walk-on. I played wide receiver. And I know you thought when I got up here, I got to play football. He's huge, right? I've walked on to the University of Washington. They don't cut people. So as long as you don't mind getting beat up, then you're good. And so back in the day, we had Don James, and we were pretty good. Go Huskies, right? This is, I got one boo. We got one guy, thank you. And so I actually turned out for that football team. And it was probably the hardest thing I've ever done. I mean, these guys are just massive. And I remember one guy squatting so much weight, the bar was bending, and they said, okay, you're done. Like, he had maxed out. You didn't know if you could max out weight, but when the metal bar starts bending, that's a lot of weight. This is the guy that would, like, tackle me. So it wasn't like a glory thing. Well, then, anyway, I never played. I was like probably the second worst guy on the team. I think I was better than the punter, but even then I'm not sure. It sounds better than the worst guy. And in the midst of that experience, my dad and my two brothers went to Washington State. And I would say I was the only one smart enough to get to University of Washington, but I don't say that around you guys because I know many of you are Cougars. Anyway, there's the last game of the year we're playing the Cougars. So last game of my senior year, and right before the game we had this like rallying cry. So everybody would stand up and say, whatever they don't like about the Cougars, and we're going to beat them, we're going to beat them. Because the year before, if you remember that Snow Bowl that you guys beat the Huskies, right? Well, that was the year before. So I got up, and so we're in the lobby in here, all these scholarship players are yelling, we're going to kill this guy, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And so in the midst of that, for some reason, I don't know what I was thinking, I started to get up to say something. And right when I started to get up, I looked over to the left, and there was another guy who just happened to look over at me. That guy was Napoleon Kaufman. He was like not only the best running back in our team, but probably the nation, and he wanted to play for professional football. He looked at me like, what are you doing? Like, you're not just going to get up. And I was like, what am I doing? Sit down. And everybody's like looking around, were you just going to stand up? I'm like, Anyway, he says something, F you this, we're going to kill him this, blah, 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 blah. Side story, this F you guy, Napoleon Kaufman, ends up becoming a Christian, pastoring a church down in Oakland right now. Pretty cool story. Yeah. Anyway, God can do all things through all people, right? And so I eventually did stand up. I said, I know I'm just a walk-on, but I know what the Apple Cup rivalry means. I have a dad and two brothers who went to Washington State. And what I'd really like to say to them this year is, we beat you guys so bad, I got in. And I sat down, and just like that, it was like quiet for a second, and then they kind of thought about what I just said, and then all of a sudden, everybody starts going, yeah! And it's like we had a rallying cry. If Steve gets in, we win. And so I went from this like totally like nobody knew who I was, like walk on, to like all of a sudden like guys that I never talked to were like, dude, we're gonna get you in. And not just like get you in, like poking me and like leaving marks, right? Because these guys are huge, right? So that was an incredible. Just that was emotional, fun. That was exciting, and it was this cool experience. Well, the next day, right? Again, remind me, I'm like the second worst guy on the team. Like there's scholarship guys that will never ever play their entire 4 years. There's 110 scholarship guys, and only 24 play at a time. 23, 22. Anyway, long story short, so we go in the next day. This is Thursday. This is Friday, and the coach gets up, and we're going to kill him. This, there, all these different things. And he says, and after we win, and he goes, and after Steve gets in, we're going to come back to this place, and we're going to celebrate beating the Cougars. And at that moment, right, it had gone from a nice moment of like rah rah to being invited into something, an opportunity to step into something that was beyond anything I could have ever dreamed. To be able to play in a football game I didn't deserve to play in, among the players that were far superior athletic to me, purely because the coach stood on that stage and said, and after Steve gets in, we're going to come back here and celebrate. So the next day happened, right? And I'm hoping we're going to win, right? It was like we got ahead by 7, we got ahead by 14. Napoleon Kaufman broke an 80-yard touchdown. Now we're up by 21. Is it safe yet? I don't know. Let's keep, right? You got to keep going up. Eventually, all of a sudden, someone says, "Steve, you're in. Get in here." I found my helmet and put it on and came out. Got out to the middle of the huddle, and it was 72,000 people, and someone just got injured. So it was like totally silent. We were sitting there waiting for the guy to get it, and the commercial and all this stuff. I'm looking around going, no way. No way. What am I doing here? Right? Unbeknownst to me, my brothers are up on the stage, and they're going crazy. Like, look, he's in. No way. Right? My parents were up there going, they couldn't believe it, right? And I got to play. They called a pass play, and I threw it, and I dove, and I caught a touchdown. No, actually, I wish. They did a running play to the other side. Okay, let's just get as far away from Steve as possible. We'll run it that way. Hopefully he won't screw anything up. After the game was over, we had this like senior huddle, and all the seniors got to walk down this line, and all these players would congratulate them. And because we were waiting, like they had this TV on the screen, and I was the first guy up because my last name's Allen. And so here I am on the TV, on the big screen, announcing Steve Allen. I'm going down. And it was like into the tunnel. I just remember being, that didn't just happen. Yet it did. Someone who didn't deserve to be there. A coach who with nothing to offer, I could bring him nothing to the situation, invited me into a situation. And that has changed my life. And I think about what we're saying here when he says, don't just invite this person. Invite somebody who can repay you. Invite somebody who's crippled, lame, blind, who's marginalized. Invite them into your life. Raise them up. People who could give nothing to contributing to your growing, your moving up. And you'll see what can happen in their lives and yours. So here's the deal. But why would we do that? Because that experience was fun, but in 100 years, who cares? I play football, right? What God wants to do is far more important than just a temporary blessing. What God is saying here is He wants to give you a blessing that lasts forever. says, if you do that, if we will be a people that reach out to those that can't repay us, God will make sure He repays you at the resurrection of the just. Well, what is the resurrection of the just? It's that moment when we get resurrected. Those who are just, who are made justified, right? Just as you had never sinned, become righteous through what Christ did on the cross for you. He became poor so you could become rich. He says, you'll be paid at that moment in heaven. At that moment, you're going to be repaid for everything you did for someone who could repay you. And so here's the question, is this. How much do you believe that heaven is real? I mean, literally, if you had a bet, and I was to say, okay, I'm going to give everybody $1,000, right? And I said to you, okay, bring up how much you think. Would you bet $50? Would you bet $100? Would you bet $500? How much would you bet with this money that heaven is real? That if I could take this 1,000 and make it $1 million in heaven, how much would we trade there? How much would you really trade? When we think about that, how much do you believe in your life? How much do you believe in the way you serve and what you do? How much does your life reflect that you believe that heaven is real and there's a resurrection of the just? Bet a little bit, I'll go to church, I'll do this thing, but I'm not going to give my time, I'm not going to get uncomfortable, I'll do this, but I won't do this. Are you all in? Or are you kind of in? Because that in-ness factor determines how much you believe that heaven is real. And Jesus is here to tell us is that what I want to do is I want to bless you not just now, I want to bless you forever. But the way to be blessed forever correlates with what you do to people that can't repay you on earth. And it reveals your true confidence and belief that heaven is real. I mean, honestly, I would rather be blessed forever than just now. But are we willing to sacrifice now to get blessed forever? Inviting people that can't repay you is faith. And living in a way that people can't repay you because of faith is truly biblical. It's your bet. Well, some of you guys are like, well, you can't just say that I can't have a reward, that heaven is real, and do that. It kind of seems like mixed motives. Throughout the Bible, Jesus says things like this. Let me give you one example. When you give to the needy, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Why? So your giving may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Same thing with praying. God will reward you when He sees in secret. When you do things with an eye on eternity and a motivation of eternity, God will bless you. True rewards and blessing come when you help people who can't pay you back. And so part of this is, you think, well, it's a great message, but what do I do now? I mean, it feels awkward inviting people over to my house who I don't really know. Maybe it feels a little bit underhanded, or maybe there's some false motive there. It's uncomfortable. I'm not sure who to invite. I don't have enough money to invite people. I don't want to. We start getting to the heart of why I don't do what God wants me to do. Either I don't believe that it would repay me, I don't value it, or it's just really hard. One of those three things. I don't believe, I don't really value heaven, or it's just really hard. And I would have to say that I believe in the church of this group that most of you will fall on, it's just really hard. It's uncomfortable. Or I didn't really think about it in this sense. I would just call us all to a moment of just remembering that Christ invited us into His life. He opened the door in our eyes. He called us into His kingdom. And now what He's doing is He's calling us to reach out to those that can't repay us. So again, back to this idea of a meal. Why is a meal so significant? I have a quote here that I thought was interesting, and I'll wrap this up. It says, think how different the dynamic is when we sit and eat with someone. We meet as equals. We share together. We affirm one another and enjoy one another. A woman once told me, I know people who do a lot to help me, but what I want is for someone to be my friend. People don't want to be their projects. The poor need a welcome to replace their marginalization. Inclusion to replace their exclusion. A place where they matter to replace their powerlessness. They need community. They need the Christian community. You know, I first took this job at Family Promise. I wanted to help homeless people, but what I really wanted to do was help the church help homeless people. I covet your blessing forever. I want that for you. That's what fills me with passion. That's why I'm here today, is because I want you to be blessed forever. And why I love Family Promise so much is because it gives you a very practical way to be able to get into the game, right? To get into the game of beginning to serve. It's as simple as making a meal, right? As simple as making a meal and sitting down with a homeless family and just getting to know them. It's as simple as staying overnight in a church, right, on beds and cots. It's as simple as that. Well, it's uncomfortable. I don't really know. That's not really me. I get it, right? I get all of those things, right? But it's stepping in the awkward, doing something for someone that can't repay you. You'll be blessed forever. And I promise you this, you'll be blessed more than you ever imagined here on earth as well. Well, what does that look like? Well, let me just pray, and I want to invite Rob up, and we can kind of talk about this for a minute. And then let me just propose a few things for you as you start thinking practical ways you can step into this. Let's pray. Lord Jesus, we thank you. We thank you for this opportunity to remember, first of all, what you've done through your Son for us. Not only did he, who was rich, come to this earth to become poor, who became a friend of sinners and loved those who could offer nothing to him, who then, Lord, welcomed us into your kingdom, forgiving all our mistakes, getting glory for just the radical transformation you provided for us. And now have given us an opportunity, Lord, to do that for others. Lord, forgive us, would you? Would you forgive us forgive me first, Lord, for my selfishness, my pride, my lack of confidence and belief in heaven, my lack of stepping into hard areas, my selfishness that doesn't allow people below me to come to invited in. You've done that so much with me, and yet I will do that with your people. Forgive me, Lord, and forgive us as a church. Help us not to be so ingrained with ourselves that we forget, God, there's a community of people out there that need a church to step in. And I pray now, God, that those here would feel invited into blessing. Invited to step outside, whether it's a Family Promise, whether it's their neighborhood, of countless and many variety of different ministries. That, God, we would live our lives with an eye on heaven. Transform our hearts with your grace so that we would be givers of grace. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate you being here. Thank you. Often with the sermons, and this has always been weird for us pastors, is like we preach, we know, like, where do we go from here? What do we do? What do we do with this, right? And this is kind of, we call it low-hanging fruit, an easy thing to pick, because one of the ways Family Promise works is like there's a right on wall up about 4 or 5 blocks is North Hill Christian Church, and 3 times a year, homeless families spend the night in that church for 1 week.
Yeah. 3 families at a time, no
3
drugs, no alcohol, no felonies.
Drugs, no alcohol, no felonies, yeah. So, these are people who are falling on hard times, are trying to get back up, have got nowhere to stay, so they stay in the church. And so what that church has had a problem with is they just have a small and older congregation, and they're like, we need some people from Gathering House who would make a meal, and be the kind of meal that make for like 20 people, up to 20 people, sometimes it's 10, 15,
yeah.
and make a meal, bring it down, and sit and eat with them. You provide a meal for 15 homeless people, and you sit with them and eat and share the meal that you've made with them. And then when the night's done, everybody can go, if one person could spend the night, that'd be great. Right? And if sometimes we've had it where, well, the person spending the night is not the one who made the meal, that's okay. So, but it's an easy, like, hey, I could do that. Yeah. I could probably pull that off. Or my family would like to provide one meal, and then maybe get yourself on a rotation and say, yeah, 3 times a year I do that. Which is pretty low-hanging fruit to grab, really. Make a meal, which you're probably going to make anyway, and just make it for a few more people and go there, right?
Right.
And it's 3 times a year.
Yeah, sometimes we get 2 families that'll do it together. One does the main dish, some does salad and bread.
Yeah, so you can have a group that all sits down at a large community kind of meal gathering and just hear the stories and where you're from and just have conversation with them. And so we've been doing this since we moved in this building for sure.
Yeah.
Only the person who was leading it, Tanya Carroll, her and her husband moved to the Valley and decided to go to a church that was closer to them. Too bad for them, they're missing out. So our person coordinating isn't with us anymore. But what we're asking is, would any of you be interested in doing something like that? I mean, that's the ultimate low, easy way to step in and say, maybe God would teach me something, So we're asking for that. And if you're interested, now you've got a bunch of the volunteers, and they're kind of trying to talk to Steve. Plus, they have the day center.
Yes.
Give us a little bit of brief. Someone said, hey, you got a day center.
Yeah, we do.
How can I help you down there?
Exactly. So it's the South Prairie District, kind of where the Bethel AME church is, kind of the area right down there. And really what it is just a drop-in center for homeless families. And again, all we do is children and their parents. We don't do singles. So a lot of the stereotype you see of homelessness, that's not us. What we do is kids, babies, adults, parents and adults coming together to help them. And so what it is a place where families can go, get food, take a shower, do the laundry, and we have about 70, 75 a day. And then at night we have about 50, 55. They will actually sleep on mats on the floor in a room probably half of this sanctuary right here. This is probably how big it is right here. And so you can imagine sleeping in a place with kids and parents all over, but it gets them out of the cold, and it's been pretty incredible to see that transformation happening. So we have lots of needs, whether it's just coming down doing a craft or providing a meal or just coming down to hang out. So there's just ways that you can serve. Most specifically, though, with this program, North Hill really we need a coordinator or a couple that can work together, and we need some people that can just step up. And here's this kind of 5 little level for you. So if you want to be blessed, here's 5 things you can do. The first thing is very simple. You can just come talk to me afterwards. No commitment, no pressure, no hard sell. Just come talk to me, get a few things. Let's just kind of get that conversation started. Maybe that's where you are right now. That's awesome. Second level, right? Agree to make part of the meal. You don't even have to go. Just whoever's doing the meal, you bring one thing, you let them do it, and they can make the meal. Third thing, you can visit the church during one night and just kind of watch what happens, right? Safety, just kind of see what's happening. We can make a meal. You can actually sit with the families, and then the 5th one would be actually staying overnight with the church. So,
whatever we should mention, the next week is March 4th through the 11th.
It's 2 weeks.
So right, but that's the week that they're going to be at North Hill.
Yes.
So March 4th through the 11th, you're like, pick one night. We'll make a dinner for a bunch of homeless families.
It's awesome. I promise you, you'll enjoy it. The families are great. The last one we just got in, a family of 7. They came up. They were just in a situation where the job fell through, the car broke down, they end up homeless. Family of 7, and it was about 80, 90 days. They just moved into a place 2 weeks ago, and sent me a text saying, I can't believe how, he has a job, she has a job now, kids there. It's just been awesome. And how many families have come through because of what you guys have done. It's just been awesome.
Even at the move-in level, there's moments for furniture.
Exactly.
Like, okay, we've been homeless, now we got a house, but we got no furniture. No beds, no kitchen tables, no anything.
Right.
There's all these different ways to help. So,
I want you to be blessed. That's why I'm giving this opportunity.
That's right. So we want to make sure that, it's not just words. As a church, we believe it's got to be more than words. It's got to be actions. If it's not actions, we haven't done anything. And it hasn't really mattered. And it hasn't really registered in us. So I appreciate it. Afterwards, feel free to hang out and have some coffee. We're wrapping up now. And don't feel like you got to dash off. And talk to Steve a little bit about getting involved. And Steve, we really appreciate you.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Let's give him a hand. God bless you, Steve.